He didn't lower his voice when he slid the divorce papers across the waiting room table. Everyone saw it, the strangers, the nurse by the door, his brother holding up a phone to record, and the woman standing beside him like she had already taken Alina's place. "Sign it," Caleb said flatly. "You've taken enough from this family." What he didn't know was that the surgery saving his mother's life had already been paid for that morning, quietly, completely, by the very wife he was trying to discard, and Alina didn't stop him. That was the part no one understood. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. That moment didn't begin in the waiting room. It began long before anyone thought to look twice at the quiet woman sitting in the corner chair. Grace Mercy Hospital never really slept. Even in the early afternoon, the fourth-floor surgical waiting area hummed with low voices, the shuffle of shoes, and the constant tension of people waiting for answers no one could give yet. The lights were too bright. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Alina Ward had arrived before sunrise. She had been the one to take the first call when Caleb's mother collapsed in her kitchen. She had dressed in the dark, driven across half the city without turning on the radio, and spoken calmly to the paramedics when they asked questions no one else could answer. By the time the rest of the family showed up, half awake, disoriented, loud, every form had already been signed, every authorization handled, every urgent decision made. No one asked who did it. No one needed to. They simply assumed things took care of themselves. Alina sat now with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her coat plain, her posture straight. She didn't draw attention. She never had. Most people in the room would have taken her for an afterthought, someone's distant relative, someone who didn't quite belong. That assumption had served her well. Caleb Ward entered the waiting room the way he entered most spaces, like everything inside it already belonged to him. His voice carried before his presence settled. "What's the update?" he asked, not looking at her. Alina lifted her eyes. They took her in just over an hour ago. Dr. Boyd is leading the surgery. He said the next few hours are critical. Caleb nodded, but not to her. He had already turned away, scanning the room for someone else to address, someone who mattered more in that moment. His brother Derek followed close behind, slower, heavier, his phone already halfway raised as if every moment might be worth capturing. Derek's gaze flicked toward Alina briefly, then away, uninterested. "She's here," Derek muttered, not to her, but loud enough for others to hear. Alina didn't respond. She had learned early on that silence cost less. The door opened again. Lydia Cross stepped in like she had never waited for anything in her life. Her coat was tailored, her heels precise, her presence deliberate. She moved straight to Caleb and slid her hand into the crook of his arm as naturally as breathing. "How is she?" Lydia asked, her voice warm, almost practiced. Caleb's hand covered hers without hesitation. "Still in surgery." The nurse approached with a clipboard. "Immediate family only," she said, glancing between faces. "She's family," Caleb answered, before anyone else could speak. He didn't gesture toward Alina. He didn't even glance in her direction. The nurse nodded and moved on. No one corrected him. Not Derek, who smirked faintly. Not Lydia, whose smile sharpened just a fraction. And not Alina, who remained seated, her expression unchanged, as if she hadn't just been erased in front of a room full of strangers. A chair opened, near the window. Lydia hesitated just long enough for it to feel intentional. Caleb looked at Alina for the first time since he arrived. "Get up," he said. His tone was casual, dismissive, final. "Let her sit there. You can wait out in the hall." For a moment, the room stilled. Alina rose without her coat, picked up her bag, and walked toward the hallway with steady steps. No rush, no hesitation, no visible reaction. Dignity was the one thing no one had managed to take from her. Behind her, she heard Derek chuckle under his breath. Lydia settled into the chair. Caleb didn't say another word. Out in the hallway, the noise softened. The hum of machines replaced the murmurs of people. Alina leaned lightly against the wall and closed her eyes for just a second, not in weakness but in recalibration. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen. A number she recognized immediately, not saved under a name. It didn't need one. She stepped farther down the hall toward the large window overlooking the city and answered quietly, "Yes." There was a pause as the voice on the other end spoke. Alina's expression didn't change. "Approve everything," she said. "Whatever the surgical team needs, no delays." Another pause. "And keep my name off all documentation," she added. Same arrangement as always. She listened for a moment longer, then nodded once, even though no one could see her. "Thank you." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. Inside the waiting room, Caleb was laughing at something Lydia said. Derek's phone was still out, still recording pieces of a story none of them fully understood. Alina stood there for a moment longer, looking out over the city, her reflection faint in the glass. Then she turned and walked back toward the room. No one noticed the difference. Not yet. But something had already shifted. And before the day was over, every single person in that room would understand exactly who they had just asked to leave. When Alina stepped back into the waiting room, nothing had changed. That was the first thing she noticed. Caleb was still standing near the center of the room, his voice carrying easily as he spoke with Lydia. Derek leaned against the wall, his phone still loosely in his hand, scanning the space as if waiting for something interesting to happen. The strangers sitting along the edges had returned to their quiet discomfort, their attention drifting away from the earlier tension, and Alina simply returned to her chair. Not the one by the window, the one in the corner. No one looked up when she sat down, no one asked where she had gone, no one wondered what she had just done in the hallway. That, more than anything, told her exactly where she stood in their world. Invisible when convenient, replaceable when necessary. Caleb's voice cut through again. "The doctors better not drag this out longer than it needs to be. We're already burning through money." Alina's gaze lifted slightly. Money, the word landed differently now. Lydia tilted her head, her tone softer but no less pointed. "You said insurance would cover most of it." "It should," Caleb replied. "But you know how hospitals are. They'll find a way to charge more. They always do." Derek chuckled. "Yeah, and we all know who's not exactly contributing around here." His eyes flicked toward Alina for half a second before sliding away again. The message didn't need to be spelled out. Lydia followed it up with a small, almost sympathetic smile that never reached her eyes. "It must be stressful, carrying everything on your shoulders like that." Caleb exhaled, shaking his head like a man weighed down by too much responsibility. "It is. I've been dealing with this for years, trying to build something, trying to move forward and still being tied to dead weight." Dead weight. Alina didn't move. Her fingers remained loosely folded in her lap, her posture unchanged. But something inside her tightened just slightly, like a thread being pulled. She had heard worse, not in words maybe, but in actions, in silence, in the way decisions were made around her, never with her. Still, hearing it said out loud, in a room full of strangers, stripped something bare. A man sitting across from them shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the vending machine lowered her eyes. Even people who didn't know the full story could recognize when a line had been crossed. Caleb didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. A nurse passed through the room with a clipboard, calling out a different patient's name. The tension flickered, then settled again. Alina's phone buzzed once in her bag, soft, controlled, easy to ignore. She didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, she watched Caleb. Watched the way he stood, shoulder squared, voice steady, confident in a version of reality. Where he was the one holding everything together. Where he was the one making sacrifices. Where she was, nothing. Only after a few seconds did she slip her hand into her bag and glance at the screen. A short message. Confirmed. Coverage extended. No limits. No signature. No company name. Just enough. She locked the screen and let the phone rest in her palm for a moment longer before placing it back inside. Across the room, Lydia leaned closer to Caleb, her voice dropping just enough to sound private, though it wasn't. "You don't have to keep dealing with this," she said. "Not forever." Caleb didn't answer right away, but he didn't pull away either. Derek straightened slightly, watching them both with a look that wasn't entirely casual. There was calculation there. Timing, planning. Alina saw it. She had seen versions of that look before, in boardrooms where decisions were made, before anyone said them out loud. in conversations where outcomes were already decided and everything else was just performance. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't spontaneous. A few minutes passed. Then, Derek pushed off the wall and walked over to Caleb, lowering his voice just enough to create the illusion of privacy. "We should just do it now," he muttered. Caleb frowned slightly. "Here. It's as good a place as any," Derek said. "She's already cornered, no scene, no escape. Clean." Lydia didn't interrupt, but her silence said enough. Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second, then something in his expression hardened. Decision made. He nodded once, not the words, but the shift. The moment something crossed from thought into action, her breath slowed, not out of fear, out of clarity. Across the room, Derek reached into his jacket and pulled something out, a slim leather folder, clean. Prepared, he handed it to Caleb without ceremony. Caleb took it like it had always been his to carry. The room seemed to shrink, though no one moved. Alina felt it before it happened, the way the air tightened, the way attention, subtle, unwilling, began to drift back toward them. Even the strangers sensed it. Caleb turned. This time, when he looked at her, he actually saw her, not as a person, as a problem. "Alina," he said. Her name sounded unfamiliar in his mouth, like something he hadn't used in a long time. She lifted her eyes to meet his. Calm, steady, present. Derek shifted his grip on the phone, raising it slightly. Not hidden anymore, intentional. Lydia crossed her arms, her expression composed, almost curious. Caleb stepped forward. The folder in his hand didn't shake. "You and I need to settle this," he said. Alina didn't respond, not yet, but her hand moved, just slightly, inside her bag, brushing against her phone again. Not to check it, to confirm something. A decision already made somewhere else was now waiting for her. And as Caleb took the final step closer, placing the folder down on the table between them, Alina realized something with absolute certainty. He thought this was the moment he was ending her place in his life. He had no idea. He was walking straight into hers. Caleb didn't sit down. He stood over the table, one hand resting on the leather folder, the other at his side, fingers slightly curled like he was holding back impatience. The room had gone quieter again, not completely silent, but close enough that the shift was noticeable. People weren't pretending not to look anymore. They were watching. Alina didn't move right away. She let the moment settle, let the weight of his presence press in without reacting to it. When she finally reached forward, it wasn't to take the folder. It was to adjust it. She turned it slightly, so it faced her properly, aligning the edges with the table, as if it were just another document in a long day of paperwork. The small act of control didn't go unnoticed. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You can open it." His tone was clipped now, less performative, more personal. Alina looked up at him, calm, steady. "I heard you." She didn't open it. That pause stretched longer than it should have, long enough for Derek to shift his stance and raise the phone higher, making sure he had a clear view of her face. "Go ahead," Derek said, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Might as well get this over with." Lydia remained seated, legs crossed, watching with quiet interest. There was no hesitation in her expression, no doubt. She looked like someone waiting for an inevitable outcome. Alina finally placed her hand on the folder and opened it. The papers inside were clean, structured, prepared with care. This wasn't something put together overnight. She flipped through the first page, then the second. Legal language, asset separation, liability disclaimer, a proposed settlement that was minimal. It didn't surprise her. "You've had time to think about this," she said, her voice even. Caleb let out a short breath. "I've had time to be realistic, she repeated softly. Still on the page, he took a step closer. "You don't contribute, Alina, not in any way that matters anymore. I've been carrying this marriage by myself." There it was again, the narrative he had built, the one he believed. Alina turned another page. There was a clause about spousal support. Limited, temporary, conditional, calculated. "You're asking me to walk away with nothing," she said. Caleb shrugged. "You came in with nothing." The words landed harder this time, not because they were new, because of where they were being sit in a hospital, while his mother's life hung in the balance just a few floors above them. Derek let out a low laugh, not bothering to hide it. "Seems fair." Alina lifted her eyes from the page and looked at Caleb again. There was no anger in her expression. That unsettled him more than if there had been. "You're very sure of that," she said. "I am," he replied. Lydia leaned forward slightly, resting her elbow on the arm of the chair. "You don't have to drag this out," she added, her tone smooth. "It's just paperwork. Just paperwork." Alina closed the folder halfway, her fingers resting lightly on the edge. "You brought this here," she said, glancing around the room for a brief moment before returning her gaze to Caleb. "Today, of all days." Caleb didn't hesitate. "There's never a good day for this." "No," Alina said quietly. "But there are worse ones." Something flickered in his expression. Irritation, maybe even a hint of defensiveness. "This needed to be done," he said, "and I'm not going to keep waiting." Alina nodded once, as if accepting that. Then she reached into her bag. Derek leaned forward slightly, adjusting his angle, anticipating the moment she would take the pen, sign, and prove everything they had already decided about her. Alina's hand came back out, not with a pen, with her phone. She placed it on the table next to the folder, screened down a small, quiet gesture, but deliberate. Caleb's eyes dropped to it for half a second, before returning to her face. "What are you doing?" "Reading carefully," she said. Then she opened the folder again. The room held its breath. Alina scanned the next section, slower this time. Not because she needed to understand it, but because she wanted to see exactly how far he was willing to go. There was a line buried halfway down the page, a clause regarding shared financial responsibility for ongoing family medical obligations. Her eyes paused there, just for a moment, then moved on. "You're assigning all medical liability to yourself," she said, almost absently. Caleb frowned. "Of course I am. It's my mother." The words came out sharper than he intended. Alina nodded again. "My mother," he repeated, as if reinforcing the point. She closed the folder fully this time. Her hand rested on top of it. Still, steady. "You're confident you can handle that?" she said. Caleb let out a short laugh. "I don't have a choice." "That's true," Alina said. There was something in her tone now. Not mocking, not cold, just certain. It made Derek shift again, unease flickering briefly across his face before he pushed it down. "Come on," Derek said, more forcefully this time. "Just sign it." Lena didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed on Caleb. "For the record," she said, her voice calm, but carrying just enough to reach the edges of the room, "you're choosing to end this today. Here." Caleb didn't hesitate. "Yes." In front of witnesses. "Yes." She nodded slowly. Then she turned the folder slightly, aligning it again. The same small act of control as before. Her fingers brushed the edge of her phone, not picking it up, just touching it, grounding herself. "You should read it one more time," she said. Caleb's expression hardened. "I already have." "No," Alina said, meeting his eyes fully now. "All of it." For the first time since he walked in, he hesitated. Only for a second. But it was there. Derek noticed it too. "What's there to read?" he snapped. "It's standard. We had it reviewed." "We," Alina repeated softly. Her gaze flicked briefly to Lydia, then back to Caleb. Understanding clicked into place, not new, but clearer. She reached for the folder again and slid it a few inches closer to Caleb. "An offering, or a warning." "Then read this part again," she said. Her finger tapped lightly on the page she had paused on earlier. "The one about medical responsibility." Caleb frowned, leaning down slightly, scanning the line, his lips pressed together. "It's fine," he said after a moment. "It's exactly what I said." Alina watched him, carefully. Then she finally picked up her phone. Not to call, not yet. She turned it over in her hand, the screen lighting up for just a second. A notification sat there, new, unopened, from a number that didn't have a name attached. She glanced at it once, then locked the screen again, and set the phone back down, right next to the unsigned papers. "I see," she said quietly. And this time, when she looked up at Caleb, something had changed, not in her expression, in her decision. Because across the table, the man who believed he was in control had just agreed, in front of witnesses, to take full responsibility for something he didn't even understand yet. And Alina knew exactly how much that was going to cost him. The folder stayed between them, unmoved. Caleb straightened, his patience thinning now that the moment he had planned wasn't unfolding the way he expected. "If you're done stalling," he said, his voice sharper, "you can sign." Alina didn't reach for the pen. Instead, she leaned back slightly in her chair, just enough to create space between herself and the document. It was a small shift, but it changed the dynamic. She wasn't cornered anymore. She wasn't leaning into the pressure. She was stepping out of it. "I'm not stalling," she said. "I'm reading," Derek scoffed. "You've read enough. It's not complicated." Alina turned her head slightly, looking at him for the first time since he started speaking. Not confrontational, not defensive, just direct. "It's always complicated when it's final," she said. That silenced him for a second longer than expected. Lydia filled the gap. "There's nothing unfair in there," she said smoothly. "It's actually more generous than most people would offer." Alina let that sit, generous. She glanced down at the closed folder again, then back up at Caleb. "Is that how you see it?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "You're walking away without debt. Without obligations. Clean. Clean, another word that sounded different depending on who said it. Alina nodded once as if accepting his logic. Then she asked, "And you're comfortable taking on everything else?" Caleb's jaw tightened again. "I already said I was." "You did," she replied quietly. There was something in her tone that didn't match agreement. It made Lydia shift slightly in her seat, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she smoothed it away. Derek didn't notice. He was too focused on the recording, adjusting his grip again, making sure the camera caught every angle. Alina reached for the folder again. This time, she didn't open it. She slid it, slowly, back across the table. Not toward herself, toward Caleb. The movement was deliberate, controlled, unexpected. Caleb frowned. "What are you doing? You should keep it," she said. A pause. "That wasn't how this was supposed to go. You need to sign it," he said, more forcefully now. Alina met his eyes. Not yet. The tension in the room tightened again, sharper this time. The quiet watching had turned into something more focused. People weren't just witnessing anymore. They were waiting. For what? Derek snapped. Alina didn't answer him. She looked at Caleb instead. "For you to understand what you're agreeing to," she said. "I understand perfectly," Caleb shot back. "I'm ending this marriage." "Yes," Alina said. "You are." Another pause. This one heavier, because she didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't even try to change his mind, and that unsettled him. "You're not even going to fight this?" he asked, the edge in his voice shifting into something else now. Not doubt, but close. Alina's gaze softened, just slightly. Not with affection. Not anymore. With clarity. "I did," she said. He frowned. "When?" "For a long time." The words didn't rise, they didn't break. They landed exactly where they needed to. Derek rolled his eyes. "Here we go," but Caleb didn't look away from her. Because something about the way she said it didn't sound like regret. It sounded like conclusion. Alina picked up her phone again. She didn't just hold it, she unlocked it. The screen lit up between them. Caleb's eyes dropped to it instinctively, catching the faint glow before she angled it slightly away, not hiding it. Not showing it either. "Control, what is that?" he asked. "A message," she said. "From who?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she scrolled once, her thumb moving with quiet precision, then stopped. "Is it important?" Lydia asked, her voice light but her attention sharpened. Alina looked at her for a brief moment. "Yes, that was all," she said. Derek let out a short laugh. "This is ridiculous. You're dragging this out for what? Drama?" Alina didn't react. She tapped the screen once, then locked it again, and placed the phone back on the table. The same position as before. But this time, it felt different. Because now it was clear that whatever was on that phone mattered, even if no one else understood why. Caleb exhaled sharply. "I don't have time for this," he said. "We're not doing this back and forth. You either sign it now, or we handle it another way." "Another way?" Alina repeated. "Through attorneys," he said. "Court if necessary." There it was. The escalation, he thought, would force her hand. Alina nodded slowly. "That would take longer," she said. "Yes," Caleb replied. "It would. And cost more." His expression hardened. "That's my problem." Alina held his gaze. "For now," she said. The words were quiet. But they landed, because something in them didn't sound like a guess. It sounded like a timeline. Derek frowned slightly, a flicker of something, uncertainty maybe, crossing his face before he masked it with irritation. "What is that supposed to mean?" Alina didn't look at him. Instead, she reached for the folder one more time, opened Chinat again, flipped directly to the same page. The medical liability clause. Her finger rested there again. Then she looked up at Caleb. "If something changes," she said, This part changes everything. Caleb followed her gaze down to the page again, more carefully this time. He read it slower, line by line. His brow furrowed. "It's still the same," he said after a moment, though there was less certainty in his voice now. Alina didn't argue, she just watched him, and for the first time since he walked into the room, Caleb looked like a man who wasn't entirely sure he understood the situation he was standing in. The silence stretched. Then Alina's phone buzzed, louder this time. Not a soft notification, a call. The screen lit up, bright enough that even from across the table, Caleb could see it. A number, no name. But the caller ID wasn't local. It had a corporate prefix. Derek noticed it too. His phone lowered slightly without him realizing. Lydia leaned forward. "What is that?" she asked. Alina didn't answer. She looked at the screen, once, then at Caleb, and for the first time since the conversation began, she reached for the call, not to decline it, to answer, and she placed the phone flat on the table, speaker on. "Go ahead," she said quietly, and whatever voice came through next was about to change the entire room. The voice came through clear, calm, professional. "Good afternoon. This is the Boyd Surgical Foundation office. How may I assist you?" The word settled into the room like something out of place. Too formal, too composed, too disconnected from the tension sitting between the four of them. Alina didn't look away from Caleb. "It's me," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I need you to confirm something, out loud." There was a brief pause on the other end. Papers shifting, a keyboard clicking. "Of course," the voice replied. "Go ahead." Alina's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table, the patient currently in surgery under Dr. Boyd, she said, measured and precise. "Can you confirm how her procedure is being billed?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was tightening. Caleb's brow furrowed slightly, confusion beginning to edge into his expression. Derek lowered his phone just a fraction more, his focus narrowing. Lydia's posture straightened, her earlier confidence thinning in ways she couldn't quite control. "Yes," the voice said after a moment. "1 second. A pause. Then, the procedure is fully covered under the Foundation's Surgical Assistance Program." "It was approved this morning." Alina didn't react. She had expected that answer. "What does that mean?" Caleb asked, his voice sharper now. She didn't answer him. Instead, she asked the next question, "And who authorized the coverage?" Another pause. This one longer, more deliberate. Caleb's eyes flicked between the phone and Alina's face. Derek's hand tightened slightly around his device. Lydia's lips parted, but no words came out. On the other end of the line, the voice shifted just enough to register recognition. "Mom," they said carefully, "would you like me to state that on record?" "Yes," Alina replied. No hesitation, no change in tone. The room held its breath. "You are listed as the sole authorizing party for this case," the voice said, "as well as the primary funder of the Boyd Surgical Foundation." The words didn't explode. They didn't need to. They landed heavy. Final. Caleb didn't move, not right away. His mind didn't catch up fast enough to his ears. The sentence didn't make sense in the world he had built around himself. In that world, Alina was nothing. And yet, that's not possible, Derek said quickly, stepping forward. "You've got the wrong person." Alina didn't look at him. "Continue," she said into the phone. The voice obeyed. "All procedures under Dr. Boyd's surgical program are funded through accounts connected to your foundation. This patient's full cost, including surgical fees, post-operative care, and facility charges, has already been secured." Lydia's composure cracked at first. Her hand dropped from her arm, fingers uncurling slowly as if she needed to feel something solid. "That's," she started, then stopped. Caleb finally spoke. "You're saying," he said slowly, each word pulled tight, that he didn't finish the sentence, because finishing it would mean accepting it. Alina reached forward and tapped the phone once, ending the call. Silence rushed in behind it, not the passive kind from before. This was different. This was awareness. She didn't rush to explain. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even stand. She just sat there, her hands resting lightly on the table, her posture exactly as it had been from the beginning, unmoved. Caleb stared at her, not through her, at her, for the first time. "What did you do?" he asked. The question was wrong, but it was the only one he had. Alina met his gaze. "I made sure your mother got the care she needed." "That's not what I asked," he snapped. "I know," she said. Derek stepped in, his voice rising now, defensive, aggressive. "You're telling me you're what, funding hospitals now? Since when?" Alina didn't answer him either, because he wasn't the one who mattered. Caleb took a step closer. The folder on the table was forgotten now. The divorce papers meant nothing in the face of what had just been said. "You expect me to believe this?" he demanded. Alina tilted her head slightly. "You just heard it. That doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't change that it is." The words were quiet, but they didn't leave room for argument. Lydia stood up, slowly, carefully, like someone reassessing a situation she thought she understood. "You never mentioned anything like this," she said, her voice no longer smooth. Alina looked at her then, not with anger, not with superiority, just acknowledgement. "There are a lot of things you didn't ask," she said. That landed harder than anything else, because it was true. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, then stopping again like the room had become too small to contain what was happening. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "You don't have that kind of money?" Alina didn't respond immediately. She let the statement exist, let it reveal exactly how he saw her. Then she said, "No, I don't." He looked up sharply. For a second, relief flickered. "Then I have something else," she added. The relief vanished. Derek frowned. "What does that even mean?" Alina's gaze shifted back to the bowl on the table, the one Caleb had been so certain about. She placed her hand on it again, not to push it away this time, to anchor it. "You wanted this to be clean," she said. Caleb didn't answer. He was still trying to catch up. "You wanted to walk away without complications," she continued. His silence confirmed it. Alina nodded once. "Then you should think very carefully about what you're actually walking away from." The words weren't a threat. They didn't sound like one. That made them worse. Caleb's eyes dropped to the folder, then to the phone, then back to her. For the first time since this started, he hesitated, and that hesitation spread. Derek saw it. Lydia felt it. The entire room sensed it, because the balance had shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Alina picked up her phone again. This time, she didn't set it down. She held it, waiting. And just as Caleb opened his mouth to say something, the phone buzzed again. Another same number, persistent. Alina glanced at the screen, then back at Caleb. And this time, she didn't ask, she answered. "This is the Boyd Surgical Foundation. How can I assist?" The same voice. But this time, there was no pause, no need to verify. They recognized her. Alina didn't raise her voice. "I need an update on the active case." "Yes, Mom," the voice replied without hesitation. "Dr. Boyd is currently in the critical phase. Vitals are stable, but the next 40 minutes will determine long-term outcome." The room shifted again, subtle, but undeniable. Caleb heard it. The way they spoke to her. Not like a stranger. Not like someone asking for information. Like someone in charge. His narrowed slightly. "Put that down," he said under his breath. Alina didn't. "Continue," she said. "There is one item requiring confirmation," the voice added. "The extended post-operative care plan exceeds standard coverage thresholds. We will need authorization to proceed at full capacity." Alina didn't look at the phone. She looked at Caleb. "You said you were taking responsibility," she said quietly. The words didn't sound like a challenge. They sounded like a reminder. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I am." Alina nodded once. Then, without breaking eye contact, she spoke into the phone. "Approve it," she said. "No limitations." "Yes, Mom." Authorization confirmed. The call ended. This time, she didn't set the phone down immediately. She held it for a moment longer, as if making sure the decision had fully settled into the room. Then she placed it beside the folder again. The silence that followed wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition trying to catch up. Derek lowered his phone completely now. For the first time since this started, he wasn't recording. He was staring. "What the hell is this?" he said, not even trying to keep his voice down. No one answered him, because the question wasn't simple anymore. Lydia's expression had changed too. Not dramatically, but enough. The confidence was gone, replaced by something sharper, calculation. She looked at Caleb, not Alina, waiting to see what he would do. Caleb didn't move right away. He stood there, staring at the table, at the phone, at the folder, like the pieces no longer fit together the way they had in his head. "You don't get to play games right now," he said finally, but there was less force behind it. "Not here." Alina's gaze didn't waver. I'm not playing. Then explain it, he snapped. She considered that. For a moment it looked like she might, but then she shook her head once. Not yet. That answer landed harder than anything she had said so far. Because it wasn't denial. It wasn't defense. It was control. Derek stepped forward again, agitation rising. You think this changes anything? You think paying for one surgery? It's not one, Alina said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even interrupt him forcefully. She had just corrected him. Derek stopped, mid-sentence. What? He said. Alina didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Because now they were starting to fill in the gaps themselves, and what they were coming up with didn't make sense. Not yet. Caleb ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. You're trying to make this look bigger than it is. I'm not trying to make it anything, she said. Then what is it? She held his gaze. Exactly what you're seeing. That didn't help him. If anything, it made it worse. Because what he was seeing didn't match what he believed. And for the first time, the gap between those two things was starting to matter. Lydia shifted her weight, stepping slightly closer to Caleb. Not touching him this time, just close enough to signal alignment. We don't have time for this, she said, her voice lower now, more controlled. This doesn't change the agreement. Alina turned her head slightly toward her. The agreement? She repeated. The divorce, Lydia said. That's still happening. There it was. The anchor they were trying to hold on to. Something solid. Something they thought couldn't be moved. Alina nodded slowly. Yes, she said, it is. Caleb looked at her sharply. Then sign it. The command came out faster this time. More urgent, less certain. Alina didn't reach for the pen. Instead, she slid the folder a few inches back toward herself. Not rejecting it, reclaiming it. I will, she said. A flicker of relief crossed Caleb's face. Too fast. Too early, but not like this, she added. The relief disappeared. What does that mean? He demanded. It means, Alina said, opening the folder again, her movements calm and precise. You don't get to decide everything and call it clean. Derek scoffed. You don't have leverage here. Alina didn't look at him. She flipped to another page. Then another. She wasn't searching. She knew exactly where she was going. Her finger stopped on a section deeper in the document. A clause Derek hadn't bothered to double-check. A clause Caleb had skimmed. She tapped it once. Light. Deliberate. You built this, assuming I had nothing to negotiate with, she said. Caleb frowned. You don't. Alina looked up at him, and for the first time since this began, there was something else in her eyes, not anger, not hurt. Certainty. That's where you're wrong, she said. The room stilled again. Because this time it didn't feel like a defense. It felt like a line being undrawn. Caleb took a step closer, his voice lower now, more controlled, but carrying something new underneath. What do you want? He asked. The question shifted everything, because now he was asking. Alina closed the folder gently, not slamming it, not rushing, just finishing the motion. Then she placed her hand on top of it, grounded, decided. I want time, she said. For what? Derek snapped. Alina didn't answer him. She looked at Caleb. To make sure, she said that when you walk away from this, she paused. Not for effect, for accuracy. You actually understand what you're leaving behind. The words settled into the room slowly. He didn't respond. Not immediately. Because now, for the first time, there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Doubt. Small, but real. And across the table, Alina picked up her phone again. Not to call, not to show, just to hold, as if the next move had already been set in motion somewhere beyond this room. And whether Caleb realized it or not, he had already stepped into it. The voices that came through this time was different. Lower, more direct, less scripted. Mom, we need immediate confirmation on a secondary matter. Alina didn't react outwardly. Go ahead. There was no hesitation on the other end. The board has flagged an exposure risk tied to the Ward case. Legal wants to know if you intend to maintain full coverage under your personal authorization, given the potential for public visibility. The words were precise, but they carried weight. Caleb heard one word clearly. Board. His head lifted slightly. What board? He said under his breath. Alina didn't look at him. Define the exposure, she said into the phone. There is internal concern that the situation may escalate beyond standard patient confidentiality, the voice replied. If the case becomes publicly linked to your foundation, It could trigger additional financial scrutiny and reputational risk. Derek let out a short, disbelieving laugh. This is insane. No one joined him, because the tone of the conversation wasn't imaginary, it was real, structured, professional. Alina stood slowly, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to shift the entire room's perspective. She wasn't the woman sitting in the corner anymore. She was the one the voice on the phone was waiting on. "What are my options?" she asked. "You can cap the coverage at current levels," the voice said, "or continue full authorization with discretionary expansion. Legal recommends a cap if the situation involves personal conflict." Personal conflict. The phrase hung in the air. Caleb's eyes snapped back to her. What does that mean? Alina didn't answer him, because for the first time he wasn't the one being addressed. She took a step away from the table, just enough space to think clearly. "To be specific," she said, "if I withdraw full authorization now, what happens?" The answer came without delay. "The patient's current procedure will continue uninterrupted," the voice said. "However, any extended care, specialized intervention, or recovery support beyond baseline coverage would become the family's financial responsibility." Silence. Not just quiet. Impact. Caleb froze, not completely, but enough, because now he understood one thing clearly. Money. Not abstract, not theoretical. Real. Immediate. Derek looked between them, confusion turning into something sharper. Wait, what are they saying? No one explained it to him, because it was already clear. Lydia's expression had changed again. She wasn't watching Alina anymore. She was watching Caleb, measuring, recalculating. Alina turned back toward the table, toward him. Her voice didn't rise. "If I step back," she said, "you take over everything from here." Caleb's throat tightened. "I already said I would." She held his gaze. "This is where that matters." The words didn't accuse, they didn't threaten, they clarified. Derek stepped forward again, agitation breaking through. "This is just pressure, that's all this is. She's trying to scare you." Alina didn't look at him, because he didn't matter. The decision didn't belong to him. Caleb swallowed once, his eyes dropping to the folder, then the phone, then back to her. "You're saying," he said slowly, "you can just stop?" Alina didn't answer right away. She let him sit with that question, let him feel it. Then, "Yes," she said. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. Derek shook his head. "No, that's not how this works. Hospitals don't just, they do," Lydia said quietly. All three of them turned toward her. She hadn't spoken in a while, but now she had, and her tone had changed completely. "Private funding changes everything," she added, her voice low, controlled. "If she's actually underwriting the program," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, because now she understood. Not everything, but enough. Caleb looked back at Alina, something shifting behind his eyes. Not anger, not yet. "Calculation, you've been hiding this," he said. It wasn't a question. Alina didn't deny it. "I didn't make it part of this," she said. "This?" he repeated. "Our marriage, that landed. Harder than anything else so far. Because it reframed everything, not as deception, as separation." He took a step closer. "You let me think. I let you believe what you chose to believe," she said. The words were still quiet, but they cut cleaner now. Derek scoffed. "That's convenient." Alina ignored him, because the truth didn't need defending. It just needed time. Caleb exhaled sharply, pacing once, then stopping again. "You should have told me," he said. Alina watched him. "I did," she said. He froze. "When?" "Every time I tried to talk to you about anything that mattered." The answer didn't raise her voice. It didn't accuse, it just existed, and it left him with nowhere to go. The phone in her hand was still active, still connected. "Waiting." "Mom," the voice said again, carefully this time, "we do need your final direction on the authorization." The room held still. Because now, this wasn't about the divorce papers anymore. This was about control, real control. Caleb looked at her, something almost unrecognizable in his expression. Not dominance, not certainty. Something closer to dependence. "What are you going to do?" he asked. For the first time, he wasn't telling her. He was asking. Alina took a slow breath. Her grip on the phone tightened just slightly. Not from hesitation, from clarity. "I'm going to do what I've always done," she said. She didn't look away from him. "Make sure the person on that table gets a chance to come home." The words were simple, but they drew a line no one could ignore. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Lydia said nothing. Caleb held her gaze, and in that moment he realized something he hadn't before. Whatever power he thought he had in this room was borrowed, and it wasn't his anymore. Alina lifted the phone slightly. "Continue full authorization," she said. "No hesitation, no condition." "Yes, Mom," the voice replied. "We'll proceed accordingly." The line went silent. She ended the call, set the phone down, and only then she looked at the folder again, the divorce papers. Still unsigned, still waiting, but no longer in control of anything. Caleb followed her gaze. Slowly, and for the first time since this began, he didn't tell her to sign. Because now he wasn't sure he wanted her to, and that uncertainty was exactly where everything started to break. No one reached for the folder. Not anymore. It stayed where it was, slightly angled on the table, its importance fading with every passing second. The pages inside had been prepared to end something. Now they just sat there, waiting for relevance that wasn't coming back. Caleb looked at them anyway, like he needed something familiar to hold onto. "You said you'd sign it," he muttered, not quite meeting her eyes. Alina didn't respond immediately. She followed his gaze to the folder, then back to him. "I said I would," she replied, "but not like this." The words settled between them again, heavier now, because this time he understood that this wasn't just about the moment. It was about everything that had led to it. Derek exhaled sharply, dragging a hand over his face. "This is getting out of control," he said. "We had a plan. You had a plan." He looked directly at Caleb now. "Don't lose your nerve over whatever this is." Alina didn't react to the dismissal. She had heard versions of it before. What mattered was Caleb. And he wasn't looking at Derek. He was still watching her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the version he had lived with for years. "You've been funding this how long?" he asked. There was no accusation in it now, just confusion. Alina considered the question. "Long enough," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you need right now." That didn't satisfy him, but it stopped him. Because pushing further felt risky in a way it hadn't before. Lydia stepped in again, her voice carefully measured. "It doesn't matter how long," she said. "What matters is that this doesn't change the agreement." She turned slightly toward Caleb, her tone softening. "You made a decision. Don't let this distract you from it." Her words were smooth, familiar, reassuring, and for a second, it almost worked. Caleb straightened slightly, his posture shifting back toward something more certain. "She's right," he said, though the conviction wasn't as strong as before. "This doesn't change anything." Alina watched him, carefully. Then she nodded once. "Then go ahead," she said. The simplicity of it caught him off guard. "What? You wanted this done," she continued. "Finish it." She reached for the folder again, opened it, turned it toward him this time. The pen rested beside it, waiting. Caleb stared at it, then at her. "You're not even going to argue?" he asked again. Alina's expression didn't shift. "No," she said. Derek let out a short, relieved breath. "Good, finally." He lifted his phone again, instinct returning, ready to capture the moment he thought was back on track. Lydia relaxed slightly, the tension easing from her shoulders. Everything was falling back into place, or so they thought. Caleb reached for the pen, his fingers closed around it, but he didn't move, because something in the air hadn't settled. It had shifted too much. He looked at her again. "You're just going to walk away," he said. Alina held his gaze. "Yes, and that's it." The answer should have made it easier. It didn't, because now there was no resistance to push against, no weakness to dominate. Just a door. Open. Waiting. Derek cleared his throat impatiently. Then sign, or let him sign, and let's move on. Caleb glanced at him, then back at the paper. His grip on the pen tightened. Alina watched the movement, not the hesitation. The pressure. The need to prove something. "You're doing this because you think it fixes things," she said. He frowned. "It does. It fixes the deal," she corrected. He didn't deny it. Lydia's eyes flicked toward her sharply, then away again. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud in front of her. Caleb exhaled. "It fixes what needs to be fixed." Alina nodded slowly. "And what about everything else?" He didn't answer, because there wasn't a clean answer. The silence stretched again. Then his phone buzzed, sharp, immediate. He froze. Looked down. The screen lit up. A name appeared. Derek leaned slightly, trying to see. "Who is it?" Caleb didn't respond right away. His expression shifted. Not confusion. Concern. It's the buyer, he said quietly. That changed everything. Derek straightened instantly. Answer it. Lydia's posture snapped back into focus. Put it on speaker. Caleb hesitated, then answered. Yeah? The voice on the other end didn't waste time. I just saw something I didn't like, the man said, his tone clipped. Is there a situation at the hospital I should know about? Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. No. Everything's under control. Across the table, Derek's phone was still raised, still recording, still capturing everything. Alina's eyes flicked to it for a brief moment, then back to Caleb. The voice on the call continued, because I've got someone telling me there's a scene, public, involving your wife. The word wife hung in the air. Heavy, complicated. Caleb's jaw clenched. It's being handled, it better be, the man replied. I'm not attaching my name to instability. Not now. The line went quiet for a second. Then, I need this clean, Caleb. The call ended. No goodbye, no reassurance, just expectation. Caleb lowered the phone slowly. The room didn't breathe because now the stakes had shifted again. Not just personal, business, reputation, money. Everything Derek had been pushing toward. Everything Lydia had been building around. And suddenly it was all sitting on the edge of what had just happened in this room. Derek spoke first, urgency breaking through. You need to fix this now. Lydia stepped closer again. Sign it. End it. That's what he wants. Caleb looked at the folder, then at Alina, then at the phone in his hand, everything pulling in different directions. Alina didn't move, didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because now he wasn't deciding how to end her. He was deciding what he was willing to lose, and for the first time, he wasn't sure which answer would cost him more. No one spoke, not right away. The silence after the call felt heavier than anything that had come before it. Not because of what had been said, but because of what hadn't. The buyer hadn't asked questions. He hadn't negotiated. He had drawn a line. Caleb stood there, phone still in his hand, staring at nothing for a second too long. Derek broke first. You heard him, he said, voice tight with urgency. We need to clean this up now. Lydia nodded once, stepping closer again, her tone sharpened by pressure. This is exactly what I warned you about. This kind of scene, it kills deals. Caleb didn't answer. His eyes moved slowly from Derek to Lydia, and then back to Alina. She hadn't moved. Not when the call ended. Not when the pressure shifted. She was still standing there, calm, steady, untouched by the urgency closing in around everyone else. And that was the problem. Because now, she was the only one in the room who wasn't reacting. What do you want? Caleb asked again. The question came out quieter this time. Less demand. More need. Alina studied him for a moment. Not the man he was trying to be. The one underneath it. The one she had known years ago. The one who had needed help. The one who had promised things he hadn't kept. Then she let that version go. I already told you, she said. Time? Derek scoffed. We don't have time. You don't, Alina said. The correction landed fast. Sharp. Because as it was true. The deal wasn't hers. The pressure wasn't hers. The risk wasn't hers. Caleb ran a hand over his face again, pacing once before stopping at the edge of the table. You're putting everything at risk over what? A point? Alina's gaze didn't shift. No. Then what? She held his eyes over clarity. The word hung there, simple, unavoidable. Lydia crossed her arms, frustration breaking through now. This isn't about clarity. This is about control. Alina turned her head slightly toward her. Yes, she said, no hesitation, no denial. That answer caught Lydia off guard more than anything else. It's because she expected resistance, not agreement. You don't get to suddenly take control now, Lydia said, her voice tightening. Not after staying silent this whole time. Alina's expression didn't change. I didn't stay silent, she said. You just didn't listen. That ended that. Lydia didn't respond again. Because there was nothing clean to say back. Caleb exhaled slowly, his patience thinning into something else now. Not anger, not exactly. Pressure. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said. No, Alina replied. I'm making it accurate. Derek let out a harsh laugh. Accurate? What does that even mean? Alina reached for the folder again. Not to sign it? To open it, she flipped through the pages, slower this time, her fingers brushing over sections that had been ignored before. You built this like I wouldn't question anything, she said. Caleb frowned. Because you never did. Alina paused. Looked up. That was your first mistake. The words didn't rise, but they landed, because now He could see it. The difference. The shift. She wasn't the same person who had let things slide. She wasn't the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. Not anymore. Alina turned another page, then stopped. Her finger rested on a clause deeper in the agreement. Not the financial section, not the support. Something else. You included a reputational protection clause, she said. Caleb's brow furrowed. Standard. For you, she clarified. He didn't answer. Because he hadn't read that part carefully either. Derek leaned forward slightly. What about it? Alina didn't look at him. She read the line once more, then closed the folder. Gently, once this is signed, she said, you're protected from anything tied to me, publicly, financially, legally. Caleb nodded slowly. That's the point. Alina held his gaze. And I'm not. The words settled. Different this time. Because now they understood what she meant. Lydia's expression sharpened. That's how divorce works. Alina shook her head once. No, she said. That's how this version works. Silence again. Because now the conversation had shifted somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. You think you deserve more? Derek said, his voice edged with disbelief. Alina looked at him. For 10 years? She asked quietly. He didn't answer. Because that wasn't a number he had been thinking about. Caleb looked away first. That mattered. Alina stepped back slightly, creating space again. Not retreating, reframing. You want this done today, she said. Yes, Caleb replied immediately. Then it gets done correctly. And what does that mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up her phone again. Not to call, not yet. Just to check something. A message had come through. Short, direct. She read it once, then locked the screen, her decision settled. It means, she said, looking back at him, you don't walk away clean while I carry everything you don't want to deal with. Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm not doing that. You already tried. That hit. Because it was true. The room held still again. Derek shifted uneasily. Lydia didn't speak. And Caleb, he looked at her like he was seeing the full shape of the situation for the first time. Not just the divorce, not just the deal, the imbalance, the assumption, the mistake. What are you asking for? He said. There it was, clear, direct, real. Alina took a breath, not to steady herself, to choose her words, but before she could answer, Derek's phone buzzed, sharp, urgent. He glanced down, then froze. What? Caleb snapped. Derek didn't respond right away. He turned the screen toward him. Caleb's eyes dropped to it, and whatever he saw drained the last bit of certainty from his face. The video, already online, already spreading. The waiting room, the papers, the voice, everything. And at the center of it, him. Caleb looked up slowly. At Alina, at the room, at the reality closing in from every direction. And, for the first time since this began, he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was trying to understand how much damage had already been done. The hospital had gone quiet by the time everything settled. Not the kind of silence that came from peace. The kind that followed something irreversible. Caleb sat alone in a corner of the waiting room hours later, staring at his phone long after the calls had stopped coming. The deal was gone. Not paused. Not delayed. Gone. The video had spread faster than anyone expected. Investors pulled back, partners stopped answering. Lydia had left before midnight, her tone clipped, her distance immediate. Derek stayed longer, trying to fix something that couldn't be repaired, until he finally understood the same thing Caleb had. This wasn't damage control anymore. It was aftermath. Across the building, behind a restricted door Caleb no longer had access to, the surgery had been completed. His mother was stable. The surgeon had done his job, and the bill had never been his to carry. He knew that now, not because Alina had explained it, because the hospital had, not publicly, not loudly, but clearly enough through the right channels. The surgical program, the funding structure, the approval authority that had quietly moved behind the scenes. Her name was there not as a donor, as the source, everything he thought he had provided, and standing beside him the entire time, and he had pushed it away. By morning, the divorce papers were no longer a weapon. They were a formality. Alina didn't rush them. She didn't drag them either. The process moved through attorneys, structured, precise, exactly as it should have been from the beginning. Clauses were rewritten. Protections were balanced. What had been one-sided became fair, not generous, not punishing, accurate. Caleb signed first this time. There was no audience, no camera, no performance, just a man understanding, too late, what he had chosen to lose. Alina signed after. No hesitation, no emotion that anyone else could see, only a quiet finality. She didn't stay in the house after that, not because she had to leave, because she chose to. The place had never really been hers, not in the way that mattered. It had been a space she occupied, adjusted to, made livable, but not something she needed to hold on to. She moved into a smaller place across the city. Clean, quiet, intentional, no excess, no display. For the first time in years, nothing in her life was hidden. Her work came into the light naturally, not as an announcement, not as a reveal staged for effect, just through the people who already knew, the systems already in place, the decisions that now carried her name openly. The foundation expanded. The hospital program continued. The same systems she had built in silence now operated without disguise. And people treated her differently. Of course they did. Respect came faster. Recognition followed. Doors opened before she reached them. But it didn't feel the way she once thought it might, because now she understood something she hadn't fully seen before. None of that was what she had been missing. The hardest part wasn't rebuilding. It was sitting with what had been real and what hadn't. The years she had given weren't fake. The care wasn't imagined. The effort wasn't wasted. But the way it had been received, that part had been. And that truth didn't break her. It clarified everything. Weeks later, she ran into Caleb one last time. Not planned, not dramatic. Just two people crossing paths outside a legal office after final documents were filed. He looked different, not ruined, just quieter. Like someone who had stopped trying to prove something. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to speak. "I didn't know," he said finally. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't enough to be one. Alina nodded once. "I know." That was all she gave him. Because that was all that was true. Not knowing had never been the real problem. Not asking had been. He looked like he wanted to say more, explain, apologize, rewrite something that no longer existed. But he didn't, and she didn't wait. She stepped past him. Not with anger, not with forgiveness that invited him back, just with clarity, the kind that didn't need anything from him anymore. By the time she reached the street, the moment had already closed. What remained wasn't what she had lost. It was what she had finally taken back. Her voice, her choices, her life without negotiation. That night, she stood by the window of her new place.
Was looking out now city.
That no longer felt like something she had to navigate carefully. It was just there. And so was she. No disguise, no performance, no one left to convince. Some people lost everything chasing power. Others lost everything and finally found themselves. If you've ever had to choose between holding on and walking away, you already know which one takes more strength.